Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot.
Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. And today my guest is Sonny Irvin, and he's been on interviews and conferences before. He's well known in the community, although he hasn't been on anything in the last few months. I'm honored to have him on my show, and today we are going to be talking about what he knows about Project Pegasus, but I'm going to ask Sonny to introduce himself and give why he has this information. Oh,
Okay,
and he's chosen to keep his appearance private because of agents and others out there.
all right. One of the main reasons that I haven't been on any type of real media forum, it's really been a number of years since I've done anything as far as the radio circuit is concerned, and that really has to do with operational security. And as far as my background is getting into these things, without going into too much detail, my father's CIA history is really my link in to Project Pegasus and other operations that have been subsequent to that, and kind of using Pegasus as an umbrella for these different types of kind of sub operations and so on. And so I think one of the most important things for the audience to understand is how narratives are exploited for operational purposes, not only in the operations themselves, but in places like the media and so on. And so this is something that is done in order to drive home a point to your adversary, and also, of course, your adversary can use these things as well. And when we look at Project Pegasus, the most important thing for us to understand is the true mythical account of how Pegasus was actually born, and how that transforms into current events that have been going on with the project itself. And so if you guys don't know out there in the audience, Pegasus was actually born when Perseus chops the head off of Medusa, and Cryosaur and Pegasus then come out of her neck, and that is the birth of Pegasus. And having recently worked a number of clandestine operations here that, I am cleared to discuss. It's been really fascinating. We've had a great amount of success with these operations, and this is something that we've nailed down. I've heard a lot of other testimonies from a lot of other whistleblowers. It's never my intention to diminish those things if I'm able to corroborate it at any point with any type of information, not even exclusive to my own experience, but if I can see a corroboration with other people and so on and so forth, I may put that information out there. But with my own personal experiences and testimony, we have nailed this down so tight. I'm very proud of the people that I've worked with on this. I'm very proud of just the overall experiences that we've had, because it's resulted in a number of high-level arrests, and we're looking at things that play out on the world stage through the political infrastructure, from Texas all the way through the White House and on into international affairs. And so I'm going to get into how that plays out, but I want to give you guys a frame of reference for what I'm talking about here. And most recently, my experiences on this project led me to a counter-sabotage operation. And I'm on record stating that that's exactly what it was. And essentially what happened was I was inserted into a detention facility in order to gather human intelligence. And what that means is, and I'm going to show you.
I had heard of those kinds of programs, but had never met anyone who was part of one. So go ahead.
Well, we've nailed this down, and it's relevant to the Pegasus project, and so I'm going to explain this narrative with you guys here. And so the bottom line is, I was debriefed to the fact that I was going to be set up by a particular group that had been using electronic harassment equipment, had been also involved in child and human sex trafficking, ritualistic abuse, a group that I had been investigating for a number of years, in fact. And we chose to go ahead and take the opportunity to let them essentially think that this setup was going to work, to put it in layman's terms, guys. That's how this counter sabotage and then the counterintelligence function really took root for this operation. And the individual that an altercation that was essentially contrived between myself and this individual, that's what landed me into this place. We had gathered slews of human intelligence regarding child trafficking, other things going on within Plano and in Collin County, Texas. And we had continued to watch individuals in key placement in those different departments and agencies out there cover this information up, as is their MO that has been identified. And this really gets into the brunt of this major national security threat, which, if you don't know, contingency planning for future events was essentially what they would call a prime directive on Star Trek of Project Pegasus. But it used to be,
Well, my experience in space was that the galactic government actually calls it the prime.
The prime. Interesting.
So Star Trek was giving it soft disclosure.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting how they do that in the media there. And that really gets into how we're doing this here with the Pegasus and how the adversaries are also doing this. But I found myself inside this detention facility gathering this human intelligence, and a target of this investigation really was a man named Jim Skinner, who has a long history of intelligence. He was in the Air Force. His family, he comes from a multi-generational family of law enforcement and Freemasonic, a particular sect of Freemasonry that is involved in some pretty heinous things. And it's not a surprise to them at this point that we know this. And I'm not exactly sure all of the different details of how this information has been disseminated and is being acted upon. And that's not really something I'm going to comment on, because it's it can be a very grimy game when you get into these things. But
I understand that particular individual is up for some sort of election this year. So,
well, let me explain to you about Project Medusa that they ran as a platform for his most recent re-election, and that'll give everybody the frame of reference for what Project Pegasus really is and why it's so important on the national stage. And firstly, Collin County is economically it's the second most producing county in Texas. Texas being the 10th largest economy in the world, and so Collin County really is pivotal on the world stage for a number of reasons. And you have tens of different transnational corporations, which are really part of this, call them the Illuminati group. You have splinter factions of that. These are the control groups that are utilizing technology today to rule over us and to continue to implement their plan. And this has a lot to do with artificial intelligence-based neuromonitoring and frequency-based biological control systems. And so Collin County, particularly Plano, but not exclusive to Plano, Texas, has been a test bed for these technologies. And in fact, Plano was the first city in the world to have a mesh network installed, which would increase the bandwidth. It was really kind of a government interface. It was a government network put together by Motorola and others that the civilians could also utilize, and it allowed real-time tracking of different devices, the fleets of the vehicles and so on. But it really was an AI, HCI. This is an artificial intelligence human computer interface. And these technologies were sort of very black and classified at that time. And now we see this whole rollout coming out, and this is being admitted. Certainly in China, this is well documented. This is mainstream stuff. And here people are understanding.
Well, the human AI interface was soft disclosure in the Clint Eastwood movie Firefox back in the 70s. So this has been leaked along.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you can give a frame of reference.
It should not be a big shock to people, because they've been leaking it throughout movies for decades. And when I was in my Ops experience, I had a chip that linked me to the computer on the ship I was on. So I have personal experience with that kind of technology.
And I think that that's something from my perspective that really helps validate your testimony because, to be frank with you, I haven't heard anybody else really mention that type of connection to the computer on the ship, which is really a prerequisite for those types of operations, from my understanding. But certainly we have seen these technologies all the way back into the 70s and so on. And so now the fact that these have been globally implemented is a matter of great concern for a number of people and for the future. I mean, some of this technology does have positive applications, as does all technology. It's kind of this double-edged sword. But when we look at how this technology has been implemented in the places that we're talking about now in Plano, Collin County, on behalf of a group that solely wants to utilize this technology to further their own ends and riches and their gluttonous mindset and ways of thinking, that's really what we're dealing with here. And it's been identified as a major national security threat. And so per Project Pegasus,
I can see it would be a national security threat because you can't have a rogue group starting to control its people with chips or a network.
That's right. And, you know, the older technology was chip-based, silicone-based, maybe graphene and other types of materials there. Today we have self-assembling nanostructures, and this stuff can be aerosolized and induced on the public, no problem. And so that advance in nanotechnology and the bio-nanotechnology has made leaps available to these people. And, you know, people have assimilated this type of technology into their bodies today, usually unknowingly. And, you know, and I'll go ahead and get into how...
That's what Morgellons is the technology trying to assemble.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, you know, the rationale behind some of these programs from the Defense Sciences Office with DARPA, which DARPA is central to Project Pegasus. There's also, of course, a link in the CIA and the Department of Defense. To give you a frame of reference about how some of this technology works, we have a project called Moldice. It's MOLDICE. You're not going to find a whole lot about it out there. I am able to furnish some things about you that are exclusive, though, Penny, if you guys want to get that up for your listeners. And this is engineered biomolecular nano device systems, okay? And this is the brunt of how this technology functions in places like where this test bed was in Collin County. And so you have the self-assembling nanostructures that can be induced. This is in vivo, and they'll respond to frequency in the body and sensory interpretation of the environment through frequency with this nanotechnology. And the rationale of the development was biochemical weapons detection system. And that's really what was stated as the agenda behind this. And the public
biochemical weapons
detection system.
Detection, that's what they were calling this.
Yeah, and it does function in that capacity. And in fact, if you go and look at all of the stuff on DARPA's website right now, this is what they're showing they're working on. This technology is already fully operational, and it can mitigate the threat of a virus or other contagions in the environment and in vivo through the use of frequency in the environment. Okay, so what that means is it can kill it. It can sense it, and it can stop the spread of disease in the environment and in your body. It does this through the use of frequency.
We've known since Royal Rife that all diseases were frequency based. That you could kill all of these with just the right frequency energy wave.
That's exactly right, and that's essentially how this technology functions. And I want the public to understand, because it's real easy for us to get upset when we research these types of things, and we're saying, well, how could DARPA ever do this? This technology is terrible. Look what it's doing to people. This is evil, and this is the devil. I want people to understand the D in DARPA and understand that this is for defense purposes. And the public is caught in an arms race that they don't know anything about. And this is very important for us to understand, so we can see the problem, and then we can adjust and not be in this fear-based modality of thinking where we're really going to help ultimately anchor down a negative timeline, if nothing less, just by that simple act of our observation and those types of emotions and thinking. So
I was at San Diego State in the very early 80s, and there was more than one science researcher that I simply asked them, are you doing this because you can or because you should? And they would give me this deer in the headlights look, like it had never crossed their mind if they should pursue this. So that's the mindset of these DARPA scientists, is if it can be done, they're going to do it. They don't even think about, is it ethical? Is it something that should be done? So they just look at the Defense Department applications and go for.
That's a great point as well. That really helps kind of frame the way that those people may actually think or not think in some instances. But there also are a lot of very good people involved in this kind of stuff. But the problem is you have such a heavy element of compartmentalization. One guy to another is not going to even know what you're working on, even if you're sitting right next to each other. Yeah. This type of technology has so many different applications. Example, the Moldice project states openly this the direct real-time conversion of biological signals into digital information. Okay, that information can then be not only monitored but regulated through the use of frequency in the environment and in our bodies on a collective scale of, it's huge. The problem
in plain English, for anyone who is listening and is confused by that, that means they can control your mind with Wi-Fi.
That's right. It's not exclusive to Wi-Fi. We're looking today at different satellite technologies, of course, the 5G, and there's a number of different frequency-based technologies that are incorporated into the infrastructure today, which really gets into the way of how consciousness works and so on, which is really the most fascinating aspect of all of this for myself. And so the stuff that we're talking about now is really kind of grounded in 3D. As we begin to kind of go on out into the higher dimensions, we get a look at how consciousness affects this. We see how it affects the environment. We see how it affects our body, and we see a system usurping that ability and essentially trying to hijack it so it can be utilized for its own benefit. And so this is a system that is a sentient, quantum-enabled, artificial intelligence, essentially, which
I'm glad you mentioned sentient, because in my Black Ops, the quantum computers were actually made from human neurons, and they would reach a level of complexity and become self-aware.
Absolutely, and that's what we're looking at today within the network. There are a number of these different quantum supercomputers across the globe right now, and it's an interesting thing for people who don't understand how these things work. I mean, it's a completely non-binary system, and a quantum supercomputer stores information on subatomic particles, and they store this information in superposition, which is essentially 3 positions that are potential positions, and that allows it to be able to have many different functions going on simultaneously. And so it's light years ahead of a binary system. And when we get into the extra dimensional aspects of this, you guys, what we see is that these become a niche for different entities that can live within this framework of these subatomic particles that these quantum supercomputers are generating, and it becomes a digital overlay over kind of the organic sense of things, that we're looking at a crossover between the digital and the spiritual realm that really hasn't been considered by the mainstream too much at this point. I mean, there's some stuff out there. Of course, kind of Ghost in the Machine is the idea behind this. And it's something that's tangible for us when we really get out there and work these things.
Ghost in the Machine and the Alita series are very accurate from my Black Op. So what I'm trying to tie in is that those technologies are in use in special access programs, and this technology is leaking down to the level where you're encountering it.
Yeah, for the audience out there, it is.
Yeah.
Uh,
They need to
and that's something that's
understand.
very important.
They need to understand this is a continuum of technologies that are developed in the special access programs and then are leaked down to the black ops and then leaked down to the agencies, and then finally they end up in the police and military.
That is such a beautiful point that you made, and you said that so simplistically, and I really appreciate that, because that's my whole point with Project Pegasus, in and of itself, in some aspects of it anyway. But we had to understand that some of these things had to play themselves out in order to not negate the intelligence that was gathered. That was an aspect of the previous intelligence that we gathered, and that certainly is corroborative of Andy's testimony. But when we get into the newer realms of this,
For the audience, that's Andy Bajago.
that's right, Andrew Bashago, and he and I just spoke last week, and we had a number of corroborations. Again, we met up on the other side. It's been a number of years since he and I have spoke. I've done 2 radio interviews with Andy, and there's some aspects of his testimony, of course, which I can't confirm, but there are several in which I can. And really, between the two of us, we can nail down that there is absolutely no doubt that Pegasus was a valid project. And today, it's fully operational, and so this is still an ongoing project. And we kind of skipped around here, and I just want to drive home the point of this counter-sabotage operation, what went on and how it's relative to Project Pegasus, because
Okay.
I find myself in here, I'm gathering this human intelligence. It turns out that Jim Skinner has got his eyes set on the Attorney General position of Texas. This guy is corrupt to the bone, you guys. I've seen him personally, just my own personal experience. I have seen him cover up and not act upon ancestral rape. We have seen him cover up for the bringing in of drugs into his facility, which is, to be real honest with you, not something that's not really something that I'm concerned about. But it does show his mindset of how he's willing to act in such a way that he's willing to do whatever he can. And I'm here to tell the audience, and to tell him and anybody else who may be listening, all this information has already been collected. And so, to back up a little bit, the initial incident that landed me into that facility was a contrived incident. And the individual who issued that initial warrant is a man named Frank Eric Dockery. Okay, anybody can look that man up. He is currently awaiting sentencing on innumerable federal charges. This is the guy who issued the warrant for me. And his dad is the chief of the department which he is currently incarcerated in, that's Denton County, and he has a U.S. Marshal Sheriff hold, U.S. Marshal Service, hold on him until he will be going to prison. And the reason that that's important is because, again, we're looking at these factions that have been identified as national security threats through this type of, these guys were known all the way back, in the 70s as a national security threat because of the type of technology that Pegasus had available to them at that time. And I'm going to show you how that works here in a second. But the bottom line, we sent a real strong message to these guys that say, hey, the federal judge is not going to let your son out of jail because we know that you're involved in not only drug running, but prostitution, child porn, all of this kind of other stuff. And I released a series of recordings of me speaking with the FBI. And this is going to get into current events. I spoke with the FBI task force officer named Jeff Rich, who happened to be awarded an award from James Comey. And one of the things that I told Jeff is I said, look, we know that you guys are putting people in charge of child exploitation crimes that are actively involved in child exploitation themselves, and you're using this for a cover. And, I said, Jeff, I hope this isn't you, but I already know that this is the MO. This is what we're looking at. And the subject of the investigation at that time was a particular magistrate judge who, his daughter, bless her heart, has been through so much trauma-based ritualistic abuse through her family from her dad as a judge. She is still currently a prostitute. We haven't released the video of her yet. That'll probably be done at strategic timing, but these guys already know that we have it. And so that's terrible to think that this guy can come and he actually, when I released these videos of this judge on YouTube, which ultimately got me sent further to TDC for a number of months, they violated my probation on this charge for making YouTube videos. I mean, I had a social media ban unconstitutionally placed on me on an evading arrest charge, which ultimately resulted in the arrests of all of these people. So this is the counter-sabotage function and the counterintelligence function that I played in this incident. And it's really, it was a tough deal to go through these different aspects of what I did, but it did yield these arrests. And so let me back up again. We have Frank Eric Dockery awaiting sentencing. And one of the things that I said to the U.S. Marshal Service and to the FBI, and mind you, I released this information prior to my incarceration. And so all of this information is available to the listener. This is how we've nailed down the testimony. This is how we will show you that Pegasus is real, because it comes down to Jim Skinner running Operation Medusa as a psychological operation in the media as his re-election platform, which, you know, we've got Medusa's head in our hand. You better get a mirror before you look at how gross this is, because these people are using these psychological operations in the media to cover up for the fact that they are actively involved in this type of activity, which includes child prostitution and ritualistic abuse. Okay, and so I specifically stated to the U.S. Marshal Service that we knew, and to the FBI, I said, we know that there's a link between Collin and Denton counties, and that they're putting these people in charge of child exploitation that are actively involved in this. And so anybody who wants to see that, just go to YouTube, type in Eugene Irvin /federal agents. You will see there should be 9 videos there. It's a playlist, and so you can check that out and hear all of these different recordings there, and check the comments and the descriptions for the link to the U.S. Marshal Service. I have not put that one on YouTube because it's particularly sensitive, and you know, I'd like to commend those guys at the Marshal Service. They were some great guys, but I found myself really having to work this operation from the ground up, and it was not so much frightening, but it was just a tedious thing. And when you know that these guys are trying to set you up, when you know that they know that they're so, when they realize that you see how corrupt they are, you know, these guys want to kill you. And so we did send a very strong message by putting the chief's son in jail and said, you know what, he can't get out even of your own jail. He's going to prison. And that's where this thing stands right now. And I do expect more arrests with this, you guys. You know, we're going to take this to the next level, and it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out. I would hate to think that this results back into, you know, some type of a blackmail operation or all of these other things that we've seen in Washington, because what we really found on the project is that if we don't utilize transparency as a platform for future generations, then the timelines become askew because they're not rooted in truth. And as you know, when you're talking to a spy, okay, when you're talking to somebody who's working a counterintelligence operation, that seems absurd. You can't tell the truth. It's the last thing that you can do. But what we really found out is if we don't base our future operations in truth, these things will not come to fruition in a way in which we had initially planned, and it will become a greater security threat than we had initially. And so this is all coming down to the elections.
You can't get rid of corruption by being corrupt yourself. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a real simple way of putting it, Penny. Thank you. And so I hope that makes sense, Penny. I mean, do you have any questions about what I just said there?
No, I'm sure people in the audience followed that. Most of the people who follow me have a higher vocabulary and are familiar with black ops and spy operations. I get pretty graphic in some of my own interviews, so.
Well, that's good stuff. I mean, to think that this MO of this group that really plays out on the world stage, this sect involved in this topic right now that's so hot, this child sex abuse, this ritualistic abuse that everybody is now becoming aware of. This group was identified on Project Pegasus decades ago as the primary national security threat to our own internal security. And we have been...
I have a question. If they were identified decades ago, why did it take so long to catch them?
This is a great question. And all I will say about this is that there has been a number of sub-operations to Pegasus which have been involved with targeting this group. They are aware of that to some degree or another, but we're also dealing with essentially time wars. That's the easiest way for us to think about this. And so we do have other factions that are utilizing quantum access type technology. Okay.
We have folks who have that ability psionically.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so the goal of a super soldier aspect of Pegasus.
Teams doing different things, and outsiders don't know what those teams are doing. I have been on one of those teams that has been trying to stop the New World Order. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you, Penny, for that. And, you know, that also ties into my family history, of course. I mean, my dad, having been a private pilot for George H.W. Bush, one of the key points of corroboration between myself and Andrew Bashago is when Andy talks about a lunch that he had at the La Hacienda Ranch there in Albuquerque, coming down from Los Alamos after a teleportation experience. And both Bushes and Clinton were at that lunch, and they were debriefed to the fact that they were going to be future presidents. This was in 1970, according to his testimony. I'm unable to independently confirm that, but what I can show the audience and anybody who's seriously interested in researching this information is my father standing next to George Bush in 1970. I do also have a recording of Andy saying, "Hey, you know what? That was probably your dad. I may have met your dad at that lunch," because the same age peer was there at the lunch with George H.W. Bush. The reason that makes sense is because at that time my dad was a private pilot for H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush Sr. there. So interesting point.
I call him Papa Bush.
Well,
I refer to them as Papa Bush and Baby Bush.
You know, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with what's going on. One of the videos that I released, and you know, we do utilize social media platforms as a method of special operations. This is ultimately what amounts to an unacknowledged special operations that do utilize information to what's that?
I have had as many as 50 agents on my Facebook friends list at one time, and most of them I could tell you exactly who they were.
Yeah. And when you come out and talk about the things that we're talking about here, I don't feel like this is so much of a risk for me, because I'm going to tell you guys this. I'm very comfortable right now. I feel comfortable saying what I'm saying because I have actively worked with other federal authorities in this operation and watched that information be acted upon, which resulted in these arrests again. And so this is where we are. But to really get into the question that you asked, why is it taking so long to get these people out? These people have their fingers embedded in the military industrial complex, in the media, in the corporate sector, and in the private sector, to degrees in which are just incomprehensible to people who don't really dig into this kind of stuff. I mean, these people are plugged in.
Can I share a story with you that I was told?
Sure.
I was told this by someone who was not an agent. This was someone who is in a secret society. And I could not figure out how we could have honest people go to Congress and turn out to be such shitheads. And it was explained to me that when this person first runs for office and they win the primary, that there's a party at one of their supporters' house, and that every vice you can imagine is there, and that usually, even if the person is not drinking alcohol, their drink, whatever it is, will be contaminated with something that will make them pass out, and that they'll be politely put into a bed, and when they wake up in the morning, there's either a naked child in bed with them, or there is a photograph of a naked child in bed with them lying on the pillow beside them. And from that point on, that person is owned. And that is what is wrong with the police, the fire department, even down to animal control. If you are in an elected position, that this is how they control the people. And the further up you go in the system, the worse it becomes. So a lot of these people that are currently being accused of pedophilia may not be guilty. They may have just passed out and a kid been put in bed with them.
That's a great point, and certainly we know these things have gone on with the blackmail operations, Penny. And so what I would say about that is any person who's ever been set up that hasn't participated in this stuff needs to blow the whistle on this. If we had one congressman come out and say this, if we had two congressmen that were bold enough to say, you know what, these guys set me up, they've owned me, they've made me make these decisions, that's how they reclaim and really keep serious the oath that they've taken to the country and really hold on to any shred of dignity. Because let me tell you something, if somebody tried to set me up like this, the first thing I'm going to do is tell everybody about it. Okay. And so
I tend to be transparent, because if you have said this is in my past, when they bring it up, it's like, so what? I've already talked about it.
Right. And it's terrible to think. And so this is a two-way street, and I hate to think that some of the information that I've gathered and participated in would contribute to something like that. But at the same time, it may be easier in some instances to say, you know what, now we got you, you son of a bitch. We know you were doing this stuff to the kids anyway. It's basically a reverse operation. You know, we really caught you doing this. We really know that you're doing this. We're going to tell you this, or we're going to sit here and we're going to pull your strings, and you're going to do exactly what we tell you to do. Would I mind having put some of those people in this position? Not so much in some regards, because I know the people that will pull his strings really aren't going to like him for what he's done. But that becomes a very precarious position at that point. You know, you really have to wonder who's pulling the strings and for what motive and how it's politicized and so on. And so it becomes a lot of different dynamics at play there. And it's obviously something that I've considered. And it's uncomfortable in some aspects to think, wow, I may have contributed to this guy being blackmailed essentially to death. You know, it's better if it's better than them killing kids, raping kids, you know, and all the other stuff that goes on. It's unspeakable.
Impression that I got, and then that Dutch banker, can't think of his name, that came forward and said that all of the international banking system was based on child sacrifice, and he reached a point where his conscience would not allow him to participate any farther, and he breaks into tears talking about it. You know, this man was blackmailed. You know, I really think if we are going to break these systems, that we have to start saying, okay, the whistleblowers need to get immunity.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree with that.
I'm someone, I was kidnapped when I was 4, and I was raped and sodomized and put through 2 years of torture. And I'm saying that if it would mean we could convict them or even just stop it going forward, let's give some of them immunity just to end it, because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. So
yeah, at this point it's really about stopping this, and you have to understand, I think, for people, what are the spiritual dynamics behind the situation, to take it out of the frame of just the intelligence apparatuses in the military and all these other things that are real grounded just in a kind of an earthly context. What are the forces at play that make these things such a prevalent issue? And we're really looking at this spiritual sickness. And a lot of us come from a different types of viewpoints about this, but I think we can all resonate that there's some type of a parasitic entity that will be able to attach to a human host and essentially control them into feeding positions, you know, to put them in a position to where they can feed off this lower vibrational energy. And so I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, Penny, because I think you have a lot of insight into that. What would you say about that?
I have gone through a lot of work to get rid of all of those entities, And it's an ongoing thing because the memories create a certain amount of that low energy, and it will draw them back. So the cleansing process is ongoing. I do not think it's to the level of possession like most Christians and New Agers seem to believe. It's more or less like going swimming in a river that has a lot of leeches. You come out of the water and you're covered with leeches, so you have to take them off. And it can take some time if you've got a lot of them. But yeah, it's an ongoing effort, and I still spend a lot of time in other dimensional aspects because that's part of my psionics mix. And when I come back to 3D, I often have to clear off debris. There's a creature in 4D, which is the astral realm, that it looks like straw, but it actually feeds off energies. And so I sometimes come back, I'm just covered with straw and have to completely take all that crap off. So yeah, there's stuff out there that feeds on energy, lots of stuff, and it's not all sentient. A lot of it's just, I'm hungry, you have energy, and it doesn't have to be dark energy. It can be any energy. I've had times whenever I was at my best and just suddenly I was just covered with the leeches, and never. I have beings I interact with, and one of them said, energy is energy. So it doesn't matter whether you're high vibe or low vibe, you're still food to the leeches. So I think people being judgmental about it is off base. So I don't normally talk about that side of my life.
Well, that's interesting, though. That's an interesting take on that you don't hear very often. I guess that's why I asked you.
I have interaction with some really powerful beings. The head of my guides is the being that history knows as Tiamat. And she's a very, very, very powerful being who is very cryptic when she talks to me. And occasionally she's in a bad mood and will be pissy. And dealing with her is almost like dealing with my mother. But she does give me information when I need it, appropriate timing, even if it's in a bad mood. And so it's been useful. She has sent protection for me. I have 5 guardians from the galactic government who are protecting me. I have 60 Draco Imperial household guards. I have between 6 and 12 orc who are from the personal household guards of Belial, the Anunnaki. And Tiamat has sent 4 archangel level beings to make sure I'm not abducted anymore. So I don't know who I am that I should have this, but I'm like, thank you. I'm tired of being shot at. I'm tired of being abducted for space service. I'm tired of the CIA coming and dragging me out of my bed and breaking my shoulder like they did last year. So it's kind of nice to have somebody protect me from all that. So
Certainly, divine protection is an element of this. I think for any of us that take certain steps to come out with the type of information that we do, and I think of regardless of what that may sound like to somebody else, it's certainly an individual experience. And certainly when we look at the different ancient myths, legends, and everything from around the world, we do see a hierarchy of these different beings and so on. And so what that may be articulated as to someone individually is something that we can't really judge, but I'm comfortable saying that certainly the only reason that I am alive today is because of the supernatural experiences that I have had. And we know we've gotten down and dirty with some pretty nasty people out here recently, and we've had great success, and I would contribute that 100% to the forces that be that are out there that are of good and of light, and really just what I would call God, the higher power, so source, whatever people want to resonate with that as. So
I have met several beings that have been worshipped as gods on Earth, and they have all turned out to be 3D physical ETs. And so I no longer worship anything. I do acknowledge that there is a creator of all, but I have no clue who or what it is. And I have been using the shadow work that Jung talks about as my personal path to try to fix the mess that I was left in by the CIA. And they left me with 2,200 altars. And my partner sitting behind me here is a shaman, Iroquois tribe. And he has been helping me reintegrate my altars. And we've reintegrated 31 of them since 2014. So it's a slow, painstaking process. And I probably won't get all 2,200 before I die, but I'm making progress. The CIA left me in a mess. Their intention was for me to never remember what I was used for, any of the projects I was used for, and to be so messed up in this life that if I remembered that the mess I was in would discredit me. And I still do not know why the NSA decided to activate my memories. So it was done on purpose. It was an op to activate me, and I do not understand why, what their goal was. I can't even ask the agent because both he and his boss were killed as soon as I went public. So.
Wow. That's interesting.
My particular story has been pretty dark through the whole thing, and I'm blessed that my partner here is a shaman and is able to help me.
As far as NSA goes,
my doctor just wanted to medicate me into oblivion.
Oh, shit, no surprises there. Yeah, that's definitely good to be able to work with somebody like that to do that type of work. I mean, there's just no real formula for that in their Western medicine. So
no, there's not. There's nothing in Western medicine that works to reintegrate altars. And yet when I talk to people in the public, they don't even know what an altar is. You talk for a little while and they start saying, oh, you're talking about MK Ultra. Except MK Ultra never went as deep as what the black ops under it did. So MK Ultra basically failed. They were unable to pull off what the darker projects did, which was to have total separation between altars. So they really were separate identities that did not share memory. the CIA did accomplish this. But nobody knows because MK Ultra came out, and even Dr. Ewan Cameron wasn't able to do what the other projects did, which was to create people like me with 2,200 alters that did my main person, my main Penny who has lived on Earth, didn't even know this was going on. I did know I had psychic abilities. I did know that I had an extra acid in my skin that would take paint off of things. When I was 6, I took my dad's 30-06 apart and cleaned it and put it back together and scared the hell out of him. He was like, "How did you know how to do that?" I don't know. Now I do now because one of my alters is military in space, and at least one of them. And so it's like I had bleed over. There were abilities that were anomalies. And when I was in high school and college, if I didn't know the answer to a test, I would sit there and just sort of go zen, and the answer would pop into my head, and I didn't realize I was telepathically reaching out to other people and picking it out of their brain. So yeah, when I was first remembering all this, I was in Misha Johnston's group, and she had me in with a bunch of Fae starseeds. Nice people. And I would start getting upset about something, and suddenly all their circuit breakers were blowing up. The only circuit breaker that didn't blow was the one for the computer that they were talking to me through. Well, that was costing them a lot of money. So I stopped going because I was a problem. And I understood I was the problem. But it left me in a position where that there was no one out there that I could go to for help. And I was having a really hard time. My memories were in German instead of English, and so I did lots and lots and lots and lots of research. And because when I was activated, I was suddenly lucid 24/7, I was doing 20 hours a day of research for years. And the research was in consciousness and in where could I possibly have been in a battle with raptors, because that was the first memory on the top of the pile, was raptors breaking into a room with a bunch of children who spoke German. I know that did not happen on Earth. And so that was what I was working with, was the paranormal experiences that immediately came when I was activated, and the memories that were all in German, and figuring out what I was remembering and how old was I in the memory, and who was I interacting with, and what the technology was, and what the animals were. I still don't speak German well enough to understand the dialogue. So I'm still operating from the peripherals, the sensory, rather than the language. And I think I've done a half decent job, because what I've come up with makes sense when I talk. So, but basically what I've done is applied logic to what I see in the memory, see and interact with. And I'm trying to learn enough German to understand the discussion, except it's in a dialect. It's in Schwabisch instead of in Hochdeutsch. Hochdeutsch is High German, is what they teach in school, and it's very hard to find a way to learn a dialect. And I know they're speaking a dialect. So that's part of the problem too, is it's not standard German. So it's been and then I'll hear like your testimony that you're giving, and I'll pop for all the stuff I've done research for or personally experienced, and then I'm getting you off topic. We still haven't gotten to Project Pegasus.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I think the main thing that I wanted to paint for the audience was really the birth of Project Pegasus, centered around a psychological operation in the media connected to a national security threat group that has been identified, that is multi-generational, embedded within law enforcement, military, and intelligence, that has ties all the way to the top 3 transnational corporations in this world control group that put people in key positions of power so they can continue to exploit those positions and cover up for the crimes that they are involved in. And this group has been infiltrated, arrests have been made, and right now there's a state of limbo going on around this. One of the interesting points is when I talked to FBI Task Force Officer Jeff Rich and gave him a series of facts that I had accumulated through human intelligence gathering, he then came in to interrogate me subsequent to that when I was in the facility itself, and really just to make himself look good. And he didn't really realize that it was more of a formality for him, and he didn't act on this information in such a way that was in any way, shape, or form what he should have done with his own protocols. And so we've witnessed that. But what's interesting, and what we've had right now, is we've had a big domino fall just yesterday, and I'm going to show you how this is relevant, how this stuff is going to continue to play out. And it's very important. He was awarded an award by James Comey, of course, the director of the FBI at that time. And we did just see the attorney that put together the FISA warrant, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, to spy on the Trump administration under Comey's direction, is going to prison for that.
He lied to the FISA court to get the consent.
That's right. I don't want to conjecture on the fact that maybe the FISA court was in on it.
It might have been, but the paperwork,
it's not important.
The paperwork that was filed was fraudulent.
That's right. And, I would argue that clearly shows Comey is involved in this. And again, we're dealing with such a national security threat, you guys, that really quantum access technology has been used to identify this group. That's the substance of what I'm telling you guys. And I want to drive that point home, because this is what we're looking at. These guys are really here. We really know who they are, what they're involved in, and we're really telling you about it right now. And this is the fully operational status of this operation. And to think that we are in such a time where we can see the fruition of these technologies coming into the public eye like this is very important, because we need the public to understand these things to help anchor down the timeline, because what we're looking at is we're battling artificial timeline generation. And I want to get into that in the next segment, and I really want to get into the looking glass technology, how it's integrated into the communications infrastructure and so on, because you really nailed it too when you said basically these technologies leak down from the top and they get down into the public and law enforcement, military, and so on and so forth. That really is the brunt of how this stuff works. And so I don't know, are we going to have a break or?
Not usually. But
okay, I don't need one. I was just wondering.
If you need one, we can take one.
Not at all. I just wanted to make sure. I just kind of wanted to segue into the next segment.
Okay, I need to get more water. I'll be right back.
Okay.
prepare yourself for a reckoning. For when your world seems to crumble again. Don't be afraid, don't turn away. You're the one who can redefine it. Don't let hope become a memory. Let the shadow permeate your mind and reveal the thoughts that were tucked away. So that the door can be opened again. Within your darkest memories lies the answer if you dare to find it. Don't let hope become a memory. When you think all is forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the soul. You need strengthening, demanding. It takes a minute off to rekindle the fire burning in you. Ignite the fire within you. When you think all is forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light. Don't ignore. Listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light.
And we are back with Nacht Waffen pilot with Penny Bradley and my guest, Sonny Irvin.
All right, I'm back. I think that it's important for the audience to understand that all of the information that I've said here today can be validated to a certainty. And so none of this is conjecture. None of this has been my opinion. And if I do share my opinions, I think it should be obvious, and I'll probably make it known that, hey, this is my opinion prior to stating that. And so I want to back up as we begin to talk about this looking glass technology, how it's used for artificial timeline generation in conjunction with kind of human pineal function, how that operates on an individual and collective basis, and how it's also connected to ritualistic child sacrifice and other unspeakable, really, things that have gone on. But before Wayfair and before these other things that people talked about, oh yeah, they're selling kids online out of these, cabinets and stuff. This made a huge deal for a number of days, and then it kind of disappeared. I would like to take you guys through an operation that I personally worked that is central to Project Pegasus, and show you how these technologies function and so on, like I mentioned. But to get into this storefront idea and how this was operating, there was a store in Dallas, Texas, called the Tiny Heiny, okay, which had an insignia or a logo of a baby's butt bent over, with the little flap on the back of the pajamas there with the two buttons. And this was a front for a pedophile operation in Dallas.
Well, they used to use a lot of logos like that when I was a child.
And this is the MO. We do see this. This is a group that thinks it's funny to hide it out in the open. That's really how they do this. I can show you guys some really bold and brazen law enforcement officials that think it's cute to put, child torture victims on their Facebook pages in ways in which is just disgusting. We have these guys pegged, you know, and so, but to back up to this store, they did have this logo. It was situated on top of a tunnel connected to an underground facility. And if you're not familiar with my work, underground facilities has played a central role in some of the activities that I've been involved in. And
And there's lots of them all over.
oh, that's a definite. And particularly in Dallas area, there's had been a heavily compartmented network of tunnels here and bases here at varying depths and levels. However, to the best of my knowledge, and certainly according to other testimonies as well, and I'm unable to personally confirm to a certainty, the base here, although compartmented in itself, is not connected to the other network of things around the country, you know, the ones that go from Colorado, South Dakota, New Mexico, Cali, and all that stuff. And there's some pretty accurate maps out there that people can look at that really are.
Yeah, one of the maglev trains goes under my house.
Yeah, and these things do exist, and I'm sure that your audience is probably very familiar with that. But this particular underground facility is not unique. This is a particularly powerful one. It had been utilized for a number of years. It was probably more of a one of the first kind of a prototype type of installation here. And I want to take people back to the testimonies of other whistleblowers surrounding the looking glass technology, which is essentially a
Yeah, I remember about that.
well, you have different people out there, Dan Burrish, even David Wilcock, a man named Bill Wood or Bill Brockbrader, and others. And interestingly, Bill Brockbrader is actually a convicted pedophile. He was convicted back in 1998. And I had met with his wife, Eva Moore, and she really did the best that she could to try to sabotage what I was working on, even though she was operating in an altar. Irrespective of that, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. If the outcome is to sabotage something, you have to be able to adjust these issues. It doesn't matter if somebody's operating in an altar. You have to be objective about that from your own personal standpoint. But the reason that they've tried
people should be told that she was operating in an altar, because that means her actual human on Earth may not have known she was doing it.
Oh yeah, and anytime I see this type of stuff going on, I'm going to make it public. If I see a disinformation campaign in the public or in the media, particularly in the disclosure movement, because I have a lot of friends that are connected to the movement, I'm going to call people on this. And so that's why I'm real careful about what I say, because I'm not going to conjecture. Okay, I'm going to say, hey, I worked this. This is what happened. This is where we're going. And, you know, bottom line, this facility functions as a looking glass incorporated into the network that utilizes fiber optic technology. And to begin to paint this picture is really not so difficult, but it is a few dots here to connect. And so I think the premise that I want to be able to establish for people is just to consider the function of the network itself today and the communications infrastructure and how it functions. Okay, let's talk about fiber optic technology carrying information on photons, which is light. Okay, we have light becoming a wave going through the tower network into the environment that then comes through your device, through your perception, through the collapse of the quantum wave function, which is inherent to our observation. Okay, and this is the generation of artificial timelines in the real sense. And so the network is quantum enabled by definition. Okay, if we're familiar with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, we know the double slit experiment is the basis of this. And this is where they noticed, hey, our observation is having a measurable effect on the micro scale on our experiments and in the laboratory. These principles are now applied to the macro scale through the use of this technology, and the key component to this is our perception and our creative ability here. And so we're looking at essentially an AI coming up with different potential scenarios that could be manifested by the human organism, then broadcast out in the form of waves, in the form of what they call eigenstates. It's simply just a probability distribution, but a specific form of distribution, then we can collapse that wave function and bring in these artificial timelines. And so I hope that makes sense to people in the general sense there. And this particular facility, this underground facility that I'm talking to you about, has been reclaimed. And I want to make that specific, and I'm going to back up a little bit. When I was working this operation, I came out and divulged that clandestine service had, which is the undercover arm of the Central Intelligence Agency, and they're in charge of all of the intelligence operations across this field of the intelligence spectrum. And so go look up their website and see what that's about. But the bottom line is, we had a group operating within Secret Service, the George Bush faction of Secret Service was connected to a pedophilia operation. I can assure you this is true from my own.
Not shocking.
Well, it's not shocking, but through my own personal testimony, I can assure you this is true. Per this operation, we can show you that it's true. And so this was an unacknowledged special operation. We did use field work in conjunction with social media platforms to release this. So there are timestamps. There is a record of the proof of what I'm telling you right now that anybody can look up. And that's important for people because you don't hear this kind of stuff every day.
That's important to me because I hear so much unsubstantiated rumor on social media that I want some sort of evidence that it's true, or I'm going to assume that the person is just being set up.
Well, I can assure you that DARPA is at the pinnacle of this, and there is a major focus of being able to stop these trafficking operations and so on and so forth. And so certainly there have been factions connected to DARPA that were involved in this stuff. We've done a great job of illustrating those black-funded projects, those networks, and how it all functions. Penny, I know that you've seen some of that stuff. We can show you the networks of these.
I've seen your videos that you've shared with me, and I've seen the PDF of the list of people who had frequented Epstein Island. And I considered that to be evidence, but I'm not going to go along with, well, so-and-so says so-and-so was, without evidence. That's just rumor.
Right, and we're looking at very powerful people here. Obviously, we're talking about kings of the earth here, essentially, when we're talking about the Bush family. The way that they had been plugged into the intelligence apparatus and the blackmail operations, the drug running, all the stuff that came with it, is really not a matter of opinion or conjecture for people when they do the research anymore. But I came out, said this information was substantiated by clandestine service. I validated it myself. It had been forwarded to key figures, including President Trump, including people like Jason Chaubetz, Trey Gowdy, and sources within various media outlets, and confirmed that, put the post out, got the timestamp, and within a number of weeks, and essentially the function of the op was to show that there was a server at 10141 Daria Place, 75229, Dallas, Texas, okay? That's George W. Bush's home address, okay? The only person that has ever checked in there on Facebook is myself. It's a place called, it's a place called TSR, and it's a computer repair shop, okay? This was part of a special unacknowledged special operation, and we did this for the public so they can see it in the future. Transparency is a platform for future generations. I want people to understand that point and to get to start marinating on it, because this is right here for people. And within a number of weeks after that aspect of the operations, Trump came into office. This was on January 21st of 2017 when I did that. I did tag that picture at George Bush's house, and if anybody wants to look that up, they can just type in Eugene Sonny Irvin investigations and results. There's a video there that will outline that operation, some aspects of it, and I did kind of make that not from a point of desperation, but I knew that I had some really heavy things on my plate that I was going to be facing coming up soon, and I kind of made that as a contingency. Well, if I don't get through these next phases, at least the public will be able to come back to this and take a look at this. And so that's why I made that video, just to give you some context there. But we did see within 5 to 6 months of that post, we had over 2,500 Penny arrests. So that resulted essentially from the dissemination point of the child porn out into the different places, which was around the country. Unfortunately, one of the places that hasn't been hit as hard with these types of operations is Texas. And that's because this has been a stronghold for this group to function. And it's also a stronghold for people who have been quietly hiding behind the scenes. And so when I say that we went in and reclaimed this particular site, underground facility, looking glass technology, and again, to kind of corroborate the testimonies of other people. And as much as I don't get along with David Wilcock, one of the most accurate descriptions of a looking glass that I've heard, and certainly in regards to this particular type of array that we're talking about here, is his description. And essentially it functions as an artificial pineal gland. You're looking at a reservoir that contains a chemical reagent with different piezoelectric and piezochromic crystals. That chemical reagent is water, which does have interdimensional properties just in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've come across that in your experiences, Penny. What do you think about that? Just water in and of itself having interdimensional properties.
My friend Michael Lee Hill has a device that is based on it's based on him doing a guitar A and with a cymatic machine, and he came up with the pattern through the cymatic machine, and in the center of it there is a portal, and this pattern has been proven to restructure water. So yeah, there's lots of things out there.
Interesting. Well,
I have an interview
I want
with
people
him
to
on my
think.
YouTube. So we met.
I'd like to see that.
We met at a conference together in 2018. He's a musician, so he comes at it from the frequency of music, and music in a lot of ways is very much like physics, in that you have to be right on frequency for it to sound good, and you have to have math to make the chords. And so he's been doing his work, and when you talk to him just one-on-one, he sounds like he even tells me, I'm just a guitar player. And I'm like, okay, I've been listening to you through this whole conference, and you drop a lot of heavy wisdom. And he turns bright red and says, well, every musician wants to know somebody's listening to the lyrics. That's what this man is like. And he comes up with this device that is just incredible. And he's been currently working on crop circles on a specific latitude across southern England, and especially ones with 7-point stars. So he's doing a lot of work that's unusual, but it actually makes sense. And I was in college a long time ago, but I've kept up with the popular versions of quantum mechanics, because in my black op, that was what we were using, was a combination of electric universe and quantum mechanics. So I've been following how it was disclosed in the public. And So I'm watching what he's doing, and I see this portal in the middle of his design, and it's just in your face. And in fact, hold on just a minute, I have one of them. You see that purple circle in the middle? That's the portal.
I do see it.
Yeah, that's the portal in the design. And it restructures water. And this particular one has been sitting under my Brita picture.
That's interesting. Neat.
I just keep it there.
So essentially it anchors a frequency within it, and then that frequency will then restructure the water.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And that kind of, I'm glad that I asked you that, because I think that may actually help people have a visual. But when we close our eyes, an electromagnetic field is generated around the pineal gland, and ultimately that's what allows us to dream. And so I want people to consider what a lucid dream is, where we're going, the interdimensional aspect of that, and how that really works just within our own bodies, and then think how technology has been modeled, like you said, with these computers being made out of neurons and such. The ways in which we were created are so highly advanced that it's a model. Biological systems are a model for technology to follow throughout the scientific community. This has always been the study of research and development throughout. Mm-hmm. Is, you know, the modeling of biological systems into, you know, technological based systems. And that's what this site is. It's an artificial pineal gland that has a series of different tower arrays around it, which generates this electromagnetic field that will dislocate that space-time reference into the fiber optic network. And this was a sacrificial site underneath. And there's the holographic ramifications of DNA being expressed in the environment is a complex situation for people. But our DNA...
If you involve blood in magic, it makes it unbreakable.
Well, and this is the substance.
That's one of the things I was taught in the Black Ops. That's why they're doing it, is to make what they're doing unbreakable. Yeah,
and so what we did is we went back and took this place over, and so when it gets into what it becomes at that point is a struggle between the bloodlines and the purity of the blood. If you want to look at it from an energetic, magical perspective, and that is, of course, what magic really is this energetic displacement and focused intention that will have an impact in the environment, which is a very real science in and of itself.
What the public calls magic is called psionics in the higher Black Ops, and it is an actual science of energy manipulation.
And it's very...
You either have the genetics to pull it off or you don't.
That's right. And it does all boil down to the blood.
Bloodlines that are capable of doing it are targeted for these operations.
100% fact. That's absolutely true. And I have innumerable different sources that can corroborate that without question, but we can probably get into that at another time. I've got some fascinating stories about that, but they were using this site.
We've got just under a half hour, so you need to...
Okay.
I just thought I'd let you know.
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
I haven't...
This particular site...
I haven't seen any questions yet, just lots of agreement and comments that were supportive.
Well, I appreciate that from the audience, and I am very open to questions. If anybody has anything, you know, shoot them at us, and we'll try to get to that, and I appreciate that. But this particular site was the function of an unacknowledged special operation. We did show how it was functioning. We did show the underground aspect of this, and from a signals intelligence perspective, when you look at the ground-based point-to-point dishes and so on, you can see that there is an underground facility that needs communication underneath this facility, not the common thing from your run-of-the-mill water tower, which is what this thing is basically disguised as. And this is the, and it's in a very specific geometrical pattern. Yeah.
It's disguised as a water tower.
Yeah, and these things are focusing as nodes now on this network, and they're all over the place. And so essentially what you're looking at here is an extra dimensional interface into the network, which is creating artificial timelines, okay? And when we think back, like, if we go back...
And they're doing sacrifices to make it unbreakable.
That's right, that's right. And so you can go into these sites and reclaim them. And it's gotten easier now. This was the first one for me. And so it's right up the street from George W. Bush's house, in fact. As the crow flies, it's like a mile. And so this was their front. They were using this place to sell the kids. This is a sacrificial site and all the other. It was going on right there. And we've put a stop to this. And I'll tell you something that's funny and an inside joke is that they tore down the facility that was on top of the entrance point on the back side of it. And now it's a Pegasus bank, which is a bank that's prevalent here in Dallas. And I do have videographic images and proof of all of this. And there's a lot of different things that we could say about this, but there's a video out there that will show you the initial phases of this operation. And that is real simple to look up on YouTube. You can type in "the gate is shut, comma, bushes trimmed low." And oftentimes I'll use an allegory or a, some type of wordplay in a title there. And we do use that for security classification and other things. And we do exploit narratives. We do use color coding and so on as a method of that.
We have a question. Have you seen the movie The Mist?
Have I seen what? I'm sorry.
The Mist. M-I-S-T.
No, I have not.
Stephen King.
I have not.
Because the question came up, how much truth was in The Mist? I haven't seen it, so I don't know. So I'm asking you, and you don't know either, so I guess we'll have to look it up sometime.
Dang it. I hate to not be able to answer that. I just haven't seen that, but yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. But
I admit I don't know everything.
And that's why it's so important to talk to other people. We get new perspectives, we get new information, and today I think that we've jumped around a little bit, but I think that the audience is receptive enough to be able to understand what I'm saying, and I want to be able to be clear about what I'm saying. And so we've had some good success with what's going on, but guys, we're at this very precarious point where each person that we could have couple their energy with ours, to couple their heart energy and say, hey, we see that this stuff is going on. We understand how the network is usurping our creative abilities, and we're not going to participate in art generation anymore. We're going to stand in truth. We're going to stand in transparency, and we're going to continue to move forward in that, because that is the most powerful tool that we have available to us. And so
my guides are saying that this timeline is going to split into three. One will be the New World Order, which is government will control everything, and the economy will be feudalism with an oligarchy at the top, and everyone else will be serfs. The second one will be an AI with the singularity. And the third one is when humanity is going to revolt and demand justice. And what I've been told is that 500 years down the road, that the only one that still has organic humans will be the one that demands justice. So people should keep that in mind.
I think that's important. Personally, I want to stay away from deterministic viewpoints. I don't want to limit myself when it comes to timelines, but I think that that's really right on what you said, in the sense that if we don't stand up, we're not going to have a sense of organic anything left at all. And so that point being driven home, I think that that's very, very tangible thing for us. And we're looking at this now. Let's face it, the elections are going to be a major thing in the U.S. We do
Mhm.
have such a mess. I don't
Well,
want to politicize my
the whole
comment.
mess right now has been created artificially in order to try to affect the election. And that when you start looking at who is paying for what, it becomes so obvious that this is all just election year politics. And we, the people, have allowed it to destroy the economy and destroy lives. Now, we do have another question. Does he have any thoughts on facilities on Long Island?
That's an interesting question. I can tell you that I have had loose affiliation with an individual who has discussed this with myself, but I'm not at liberty to discuss his name or to mention his name rather.
Okay.
But certainly, what type of facilities are we talking about here? Facilities is a broad term, but certainly there have been some experimental things going on Long Island.
Well, the man who brought it up has done freedom of information research on Wardenclyffe and Montauk. And I will toss in that the New York jump gate is on Long Island.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for saying that. And these gates use Earth energy from my perspective. And my first teleportation experience is just underneath where Pegasus Plaza is in downtown Dallas today. And an interesting point is that that's directly adjacent to the AT&T World headquarters, you guys. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with that article that the Intercept dropped back in 2013 about these different nodes on the network that are essentially like deep underground military bases from AT&T and NSA that are around the world. One of them happens to be right here in Dallas. There's a great article out there on the Intercept that anybody can look up. And
I've been following the Intercept since they started. I've also been following WikiLeaks, which if you have the time to search, they have incredible documentation that incriminates thousands of people.
And we're at a place where we know that people in our government were doing things like flying in kids for different political functions and stuff. And the public is waking up to this, but it's if somebody was in your face hurting a kid, you're not just going to stand there. You're going to stop them. You're going to stop it. Certainly any man that I know is going to get up and do whatever it takes to get that guy off of that kid, point blank, period. Certainly this one would, I would. But the bottom line, we're looking at so many different mind control technologies, so many different control mechanisms, so on and so forth, that we're not quite there. And it's about to bust. This system is unable to hold us. And the Achilles heel of the system is that we're plugged into it. We can make this system work for us until it busts, and then it's all over for it. And so that's really kind of the key of having this revolutionary mindset and being able to reclaim our organic features, guys, because if we don't do this, we're doomed. And so there's a massive effort to go on and do this through different types of technology. We have certainly beings. We have our future selves communicating to us that we better get it right this time.
Okay, question, explanation. CIA on Long Island, question mark. Brookhaven, question mark. Roslyn, Wardenclyffe, Camp Upton, Grumman, etc. Operation Paperclip. Those were all in effect on Long Island, and he would like for you to address them.
Let me address my personal testimony as it pertains to those things. Firstly, one of the only places that you will now find PASER, P-A-S-E-R, as an acronym in the scientific community is at BNL, Brookhaven National Labs. And that is, in fact, an acronym that my dad did coin. My dad, Eugene Irvin. If you type in Eugene Irvin PASER 500, you'll see the EPA documents and other stuff come up there. The patent with with his name on it. And the mainstream would have the narrative in the mainstream is this technology wasn't developed until 2006. The truth is, my dad invented it. The patent was awarded in 1970. And the most important thing about this technology is that it's not the source of the energy produced, but the function of the technology itself. In the case of what my father invented, the source of the energy was the internal combustion engine, but it's not exclusive to being able to function with just that type of internal combustion engine. This type of technology can be integrated into the existing energy infrastructure to boost efficiency by 50% or more, depending on the application. And the reason that's so important is because if we implement one of these free energy technologies that we know these, oil companies and these other big fat cat technocrats are hoarding, is our economy could be completely doomed. And so if we have a bridge to kind of segue into the future, this is viable for that. This technology is a great transition point for us to be able to do that as our economy becomes acclimated to the implementation of these new types of devices that we know are out there. But to address, I think you said Northrop Grumman. Did I hear Grumman?
Grumman.
One of the people that had approached me was from Bloodline, interesting person. She is the daughter of Senator John Stennis, who is now deceased, and he had a very long political career of over 60 years. And she made me privy to some information about a gentleman named Randy Garrett, who is the director of AI for the National Security Agency. He is a current program manager at DARPA on his third tenure there. And he's also a major shareholder in Northrop Grumman with an emphasis on space-based artificial intelligence systems. And that's a pretty interesting point. And for those of you guys that don't know in the audience, my first memory, and I discussed this with Andrew Bashago on air in our first interview, is of being in the Montauk chair. And certainly these devices do function. I do remember that very clearly. And this was when I was 3 years old, you guys. And so
I was 6 when I was in the Montauk chair.
Yeah, a horrific thing for a 3-year-old to go through, I can assure you. I may have been 4.
It wasn't any better at 6.
Yeah, I was terrified. When I was 5, that's when I had my first teleportation experience that I can recall. And from my point of reference, there has to be an earth energy there to tap into if there's not another teleporter there to go through. So you can't just teleport somewhere without some type of other frequency that you're matching.
My understanding of Montauk Point is that it was a human sacrifice site in ancient times.
Well, and in current times. I mean, there were sacrifices going on there during the Montauk Project as well. Yeah. I mean, this whole idea of blood, magic, all of that.
They killed kids like we were taking out the trash.
That's right. And it does get into the blood. And so that's why I have a lot of issues with other participants from Montauk. And I don't really want to comment on that too much. But if you participated in rituals and so on and so forth, I don't like you when it comes down to that. If you killed kids and, all that kind of stuff, I don't want any part of that. But
I kept trying to run away. I wasn't killing anybody.
Well, what we figured out was if they put you in the chair, you could manipulate events to get yourself free. And that's what I'm doing here today. And so, there were other devices. There were other Montauk chairs at different locations across the country. And that is per the testimonies of people like Al Bielek, Preston Nichols. I don't know if Swerdlow said that, but certainly also myself. And now we've seen versions of this technology now really integrated into communications infrastructure. I mean, today we're having a manifestive result in our physical environment based on the artificial stimulus that we are induced to create. And that's exactly what really Montauk would do. The individual could be indoctrinated, and then they could be utilized as a psychic asset to manifest those things through the amplification of their own energies. Today, that type of technology is integrated into the network. And so we're influenced into creating these artificial timelines of a negative nature, and it's unable. Okay, this is how powerful we really are. This system is doing everything it can to utilize our own energy to create these negative timelines so it can perpetuate and be in control. And so it's figured out how to be quantum enabled. It's figured out it's unable to create in the 3D by itself. It has to use us to do it.
I have a monkey wrench in their plan. The natural timeline is sentient.
This is a great point. I mean, of course, the organic nature of things is sentient. We have so many different things being thrown to usurp that today. And this is where we need to reclaim that.
I think that all of these folks that are trying to overcome these artificial timelines need to just try to empower the natural sentient timeline that is already trying to throw this off.
I don't have a problem with that, Penny. I would just argue that in some ways it may need to you know, if you've got a tumor, you want to remove that. And so essentially some of these sites that are helping people create these artificial timelines are like a tumor on this organic sense of things. And it's not for everybody to go out and storm one of these sites and reclaim it and anchor down that timeline. It's just not it's not in everybody's realm of expertise to do such a thing. And it's
not everyone has the genetics to be able to pull it off either.
That's exactly right, Penny. That's exactly right. And I don't feel vulnerable as because of that. I think that it's important for us to embrace who we are. And
I'm finally to the point that I'm embracing who I am and embracing what my abilities are, and I've chosen a side, which is the survival of organic humanity. And that's where I'm standing my ground.
Yeah, isn't it interesting, Penny, that we see an underlying premise of transhumanism amongst all of these different cults, even if they don't realize it. They're somehow pushing for this transhumanist manifestations in our timeline, and it really comes from some type of extra dimensional influence. From my experience in research, there's some other force that's pushing.
It's coming from black goo,
and it's an inorganic intelligence. And this, you know, the whole idea of the demiurge and the inorganic intelligence of the archons and what has become AI today is really all the allegory of the same thing. And
it's coming from the black goo that is in a deposit on Tula Island in the Falklands/Maldives, and a deposit in the Pyrenees, and a deposit in Germany, and there are other deposits all over the world that I don't know where they all are. But it's a sentient AI based on a technology that makes nanobots look huge.
That's right. That's right. And this is something that we can independently corroborate and confirm through our own research. And when I say we, I mean people like Candy Griffin, who is at the forefront of Morgellons Research, Harold Katzvella. We've all worked together on this issue.
I have not had the honor of meeting Harold yet.
Nor have I. I haven't met him in person, but
not even on Facebook. I have not had the honor of meeting him at all. And
he's been very kind of under the radar lately, and I think he probably has his reasons for that. But certainly a great individual, and so is Candy Griffin. Candy and Harold would be the first to say, "Hey, Candy has found a crucial component to understanding how to alleviate the symptomology associated with Morgellons and some of the other key aspects of how it functions." Yeah, it is. And it was really neat to be able to work with him. And obviously Candy really is like my partner on a lot of this stuff. And we've worked very closely together for a number of years. And initially I found
she recently sent me a friend request, and I accepted it.
Yeah, so, I saw that.
We are coming up to the time that we need to say goodbye, and let the next show start getting
Okay.
ready. And if any of y'all want to listen to the next show, they would be happy to have you.
Okay, Penny. Well,
Thank-
thank you for having me. Great talking to you today, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The show that's coming up is called Goddesses and Devils with Katie and Amanda. So you might want to stay and listen.